Let's talk to Tim Marshall about this, foreign affairs analyst, whose new book, Prisoners of Geography, the anniversary edition, is out now if you want to check it out. Tim, good afternoon. Thanks for joining me.
Hello, Sheila.
Can we go back a bit before we come to the here and now of this particular conflict? My big question on Friday when I saw that this had started was, why now? Any thoughts?
It's been coming 40 years, this, really, but it's accelerated in the past 20 years. It was always going to happen. This is really not a surprise, but it was going to happen at a time when the Israelis decided they can't wait any longer. Now, I'm not making the case for or against this, but they've come to that conclusion because of several events. They've taken out most of Hezbollah, because if they attacked Iran in the way they have done, and Iran told Hezbollah to launch its thousands and thousands of short-range missiles into Israel, they could partially overwhelm the Israeli defences. So that's been taken out of the equation. Joe Biden, a restraining influence, has been taken out of the equation. And then you get to the third and the most important issue. It was the IAEA report last Tuesday, that said unequivocally, Iran has enriched about 400 kilograms of uranium to 60%. Now, you only need between 3 and 5% for peaceful
civilian use,
reactor purposes, to put your lights on and heat your home. You do not need that amount for medical purposes, and so the only conclusion that they drew was that they're well on their way to making a bomb, and getting from 60% to weapons grade is really easy. The hard bit is getting up to 20%. So you put all that together, and they have decided we can't wait any longer. And then came the subterfuge, which was the American-Iranian meeting that was supposed to take place on Sunday. On Wednesday of last week, the Americans announced they were pulling people out of embassies and sending some non-military personnel, families, home out of the... But I still thought to myself, okay, there's clearly, they're clearly readying themselves. But like almost everybody else, I assumed they would let the talks get to the weekend,
including Iran,
fail, and then do it today. I thought it was going to happen today, but that was part of the subterfuge. But that's why, from their perspective, what is an existential threat for them cannot be allowed to happen. It was always going to happen if they thought that Iran was absolutely on the brink.
How key is it that Trump is president, not Biden?
I'll be honest with you, I think it would have happened regardless. But I do think it's made it easier. For example, Biden probably would not have green-lighted it in the way that it pretty much looks like the Americans did. But I honestly think the Israelis would take the wrath of a Biden administration, and they would have done this anyway. The difference is not only the Americans green-lighted it, but that if the Iranians are foolish enough to strike American targets now, I don't think there's any question that the Americans will come in force. Whereas if it was a Biden administration and the strikes on American targets were much less, there could have been some equivocation. I don't think there will be if they're going to go after America.
That takes me to the statement that Marco Rubio put out on Saturday, I think it was, an incredibly restrained statement, wasn't it? It was saying, right, we want to resume those talks I'm paraphrasing. We want to resume those talks when we can. Do not hit any American targets, but between you and Israel for the time being, on you go, lads. That was essentially it. We'd still like a deal, but on you go.
Yeah, it was partially a holding statement, but I agree with your parsing of it. It was, let us know when you're finished. And of course, then the boss has to come in and have his 10 cents worth. And he has pretty much repeated that, if you even come close to getting an American target somewhere in the Middle East, we'll make you pay for it. And this brings us to actually a really important part of the equation. The Israelis, I think, have already severely damaged the Iranian nuclear facilities and their ability to make a bomb, but they haven't destroyed it. They've only delayed it by X years, perhaps, and they don't almost certainly have the kit to do it. I think their biggest penetrator bomb is about 2,200 pounds. That's a pretty heavy bomb. It'll smash through concrete, but it won't smash through 100 meters of concrete. The Americans have something called a MOP, massive ordnance penetrator, 30,000 pounds. That's what you need to get through it. And so this is why the Iranians have got this big decision to make. I mean, we can talk about how many missiles they've got and how much Israel's defensive missiles have got. That is also part of the equation. But an even bigger one is, for the Iranians, do we go after the Americans, as we always swore we would, because they facilitated this, knowing that that could bring in that type of ordnance.
How weakened? We know that the military leadership and the I always forget which way around this, the Iranian security services
IRGC,
Thank you,
Iranian
IRGC.
Revolutionary Guard
I always
Corps.
get the things the other way
okay.
around. That their leadership has been badly damaged.
Yes.
Well, killed in many cases. But what do we know about or what's your sense of the regime leadership more generally at this point?
Oh, they are shattered, and they were reeling. It took them 24 hours to get themselves together to make their first response. Imagine, God forbid, such a thing was happening in the UK, and then you woke up one morning completely surprised to hear that we'd all been bombed, and that the chief of the army had been killed, the chief of the defence staff had been killed, the head of the special forces had been killed, a senior military advisor to the prime minister, and on you go.
Yeah.
And then you find out that the top 20, I think it was, in the IRGC intelligence unit had been wiped out in one bomb, and then and there's more to it. And then after that, more people have gone, including 2 very senior IRGC intelligence officers and at least 5 nuclear scientists, absolute minimum. These are top-level nuclear scientists working on nuclear issues. Israel says working on a bomb. Iran says not. And there's been 5 car bombs in Tehran. And this is yet another example of how absolutely pierced Iran has been. Mossad are all over the country. Mossad are deep inside knowing what is going on. 5 car bombs, at least 5 scientists. And last bit on this, the head of the Revolutionary Guard didn't know this was coming, went to bed on Thursday night, and the Israeli intelligence knew where he lived, what floor he lived in, which flat he lived in, where his bedroom was, and put a missile through it.
And all the while, Benjamin Netanyahu attended his son's wedding, is that right?
Yeah.
This weekend?
Well, he did a number of things.
Subterfuge, maybe?
Yeah. Well, he went down the Western Wall to put a prayer in the Western Wall, a classic Jewish custom. But he'd also said he was going on holiday. He was off to Greece next week, apparently, on Hulls. This week, sorry. Should be there on the beach right now in his Speedos. But no. That was all, again, part of the subterfuge. There were 2 of these most senior people, Ron Dermer and I forget the other one, forgive me, who had announced they were going to DC over the weekend for talks. And again, you think, oh, well, okay, it's not yet. And yeah, I fell for it. And the Iranians, perhaps they shouldn't have fallen for it quite as badly. But of course, even if they did have everything on full alert, and they didn't, and the Israelis wouldn't have had such immediate success, but they still would have had success. And that's because last year, and this is why all these things are interrelated. When Iran threw about a couple of hundred cruise missiles towards Israel, Israel responded in real force, and they took out nearly all the radar and some of the air defences. And it takes longer than a year to repair all of those. So when they went in on Friday, they were almost unopposed. And now, I think that was in your introduction, they have air superiority. Now, the Iranians would love to bring down an F-35 jet, absolutely love to, but they've got not that much left. And that goes back to this very first question I posed. Who's going to run out of missiles first? You mentioned Iron Dome. Forgive me, Shelagh. It's not Iron Dome that's doing the defence. Iron Dome does the short range. It's for the lower flying missiles.
And these are ballistic missiles incoming.
Above that is David Sling for the medium range. And above that is Arrow 2 and Arrow 3. And these are the missiles. You'll see the pictures. If you see them way, way, way up in the sky, actually in the atmosphere, and you see the explosions in the atmosphere, it's Arrow 2 and 3 that are taking out about 90% of the cruise missiles. But 30 of them have got through so far. So the question, how many of these anti-missile missiles has Israel got, and are they getting more in from America? Probably. How many missiles has Iran got? And equally importantly, how many missile launchers? Because they're deliberately... When Iran trundles out a missile launcher, big, long, massive flatbed truck, you then press a button and up it comes, the missile. But when you're doing that, it's emitting an electronic signal. And immediately, an Israeli pilot sees that on his or her equipment. And the moment it's fired, well, you better get back in that cabin and drive away very quickly. And they're hitting them because they are emitting this electronic signal, getting the cruise missile off. Then the truck gets hit and it's out of service. So there's that equation going on at the moment.
Is it fair to say then, in terms of where this might go, is it fair to say that while Benjamin Netanyahu might feel like this was the moment he was born for and want to keep going until the Iranian regime has gone, the reality is the mop that you mentioned, the piece of kit that America has but Israel doesn't, and America's willingness to let them use it or to use it for them or not, that actually the way the Iranian regime survives, for now anyway, is to hold tight and just keep pumping those missiles at Israel. That's
a good, an interesting scenario, and it's one that they're thinking of. The Israelis wouldn't use this, as I understand the tech, and I'm not a military expert, but as I understand it, the Israeli planes are not modified to take that sort of weight. Only the Americans, A, have it, and B, can use it. So they would have to be drawn into this for that scenario. So failing that, your scenario, they're just going to keep battering each other. My guess would be that the Israelis would be able to last out longer and degrade the Iranian defences to such an extent. I don't see the regime being overthrown anytime soon, but they are looking to be very weak. And that's a terrible thing for a regime when its population looks at it and thinks, you know what, you're weak. And so,
and they already loathe it, large parts of the population well, don't they?
In the longer term, this is massively damaging for them. In that scenario, by the way, I believe that the Iranians saying that they exchanged a crown for a turban last time in revolution. Next time they may well exchange the turban for boots, meaning army boots, Revolutionary Guard taking over. But that's where we are. And what we're looking for now is, are they going to go for the American targets? Okay, good luck with that.
We'll see.
B, and this is also a nuclear option, not a genuinely nuclear option, but closing the Strait of Hormuz to oil and gas traffic. That would also probably bring in the Americans because so much of the world, that would cause possibly a recession. Oil prices are already really rocketing. So that's where we are at the moment, and I do think we're in the middle of it. Let's see what comes out of the G7 today. Starmer, Trump, and the rest of them are in Canada. But I don't see it stopping in the immediate future. Israel's got a lot of work it still wants to do.
Tim, must leave it there. Thank you very much indeed, as ever, for joining me. Tim Marshall, Foreign Affairs Analyst.